Hello, everyone. Just to say, the first point on the agenda today is Gaza, but we're trying to get our folks online. They're having some challenges. In the meantime, I just wanted to say that we're very aware of right now the situation with the defunding from the United States and the freezes that are being implemented on spending funds. And we know this is a major issue. It's something today they're having an ad hoc meeting at the principals level within the UN system. And, it's something that we know that there's not yet specific guidance that is in place to explain, what it does it mean other than, being told that there's a 3-month freeze by PRM and BHA, but there's not yet the specifics of what does that mean, what does that look like, how is the new government defining what is the criteria around funding. So I just basically want to start off this call acknowledging that this is a major issue and also stating that it's not yet clear. So it's not something that we can really explain any better until we get more clarity, and we can, raise this if we need to on an ad hoc call. But for now, for today, we're going to go ahead with the agenda that we have, and hopefully soon have more clarity on the situation that's happening from the US around funding. So I just want to say we do know what's going on. It is something that I think all agencies and organizations are looking at and trying to figure out what exactly it means. But until we get more clarity from the US and from the UN system, and I'm sure ICFA and Interaction, everyone is also looking at what does this mean? What are the implications? We know it's a major impact, and we also are very cognizant that the GBV sector, the second largest donor, according to FTS, is the US. Germany is actually #1 at this point from last year on the FTS. But we know that, for example, Safe from the Start funding, which many GBV partners receive from BPRM, is one of the funds that has been frozen, as well as BHA. So it is a big impact on all of us. We're trying not to panic yet until we find out what it means. Sorry, I have Astrid in the same room, so we're getting an echo. Just turn off your computer. Can't talk? Okay. Sorry about that. So to go with our agenda, we had explained in some emails that we are actually sad to see that Azra, our coordinator from Gaza, and Hira, who many of you know, are finishing their contracts at this time. Amira is taking on the new national level coordination in Yemen. And so we'll be working together with Fatima, who's our co-coordinator from a women-led organization from the Women's Union there. And Azra will be finishing also her coordination with us in Gaza. And so we really wanted to have them provide an update before they leave. We're doing the same thing on Thursday for core members and some of our donors, but we wanted to get a briefing today before they move on, especially since we're at the point of the ceasefire, and get some insights from them on what does that mean as we move forward. And then also we have Verena, who's our coordinator in whole of Syria, who is based in Damascus. She's also going to give us an update today on Syria. And then we have Hira, who's going to present on the work and the assessment that's been done together between UNFPA and UNICEF, looking at the girl adolescent. And that was one of the commitments under the roundtable that we will discuss and give more detail later. And just so you're aware, Jean Ward has postponed her presentation, which gives us a little bit more time for questions and answers related to the presentations on Gaza and then on Syria. So with that being said, I'm going to turn over to, I don't know if Azra or Mira is speaking first, so I will turn it over to both of you and you can move ahead with your presentations.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, GBV AoR, for this opportunity and overall experience in Gaza. One of the most intensive experiences, I think, for me, but we can then imagine what's happening with people in Gaza. Can I share?
Yes, you're of course, you can share your screen.
Thank you. Just one moment, please. You can see GBV AoR presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Yes, but it's not on presentation mode. We can see your whole screen. Okay.
All right. So thank you, colleagues. I'm going to start because I've noticed that Mira is not still with us. Changing the duty station can be complex sometimes, especially in the region that we were operating in. So I'm going to focus on Gaza because, as Jennifer kindly mentioned, I've been a coordinator in Gaza only, so my experience comes from that point. I think everybody by now understands that we have some sort of a ceasefire right now in Gaza. It's been sort of really not it came in a way somehow suddenly. No, we've been having so many moments when the ceasefire was announced and people even celebrating in the streets, but it didn't work out. So now when they were talking about the Gaza ceasefire, it was quite sort of a dream come true. What we are seeing, and I'm going to start speak retrospectively now, retroactively, right? So right now, what we are seeing is we are seeing the population in Gaza trying to come back to their homes. That's obviously been announced by the news. The challenge of that was that the movement itself to areas outside of what used to be so-called humanitarian zone, and so-called because it was really never that. The movement was restricted or delayed because, of course, the IDF didn't really give a permission to go back to the areas of return. Most of the area of sorry, I don't know why is this moving me. It won't move backwards. So most of the areas of return were in the red zones, of course. So people didn't have any access to them. Sorry, I'm going to have to start from the beginning for some reason. So people were coming back to the small pocket of humanitarian pocket, again under question mark there, but under the small so-called humanitarian zone, this was only 11% of Gaza. The rest of it was practically a red zone. People could not really go there without risking their lives, and equally it was with the services. So now you're seeing from this Deir al-Balah and Han Yunis 950,000 people that were cramped inside trying to reach out where their home used to be. That was most difficult for Rafah, that is practically flattened equally as North Gaza Governorate and Gaza City. The destruction, of course, is severe, and the homes that they're going to are most likely not there. First, they had to wait for the clearance to reach to North Gaza Governorate, and this photo that you're seeing here in my presentation, this is a day. Sorry, on the day just before they allowed or announced that people can pass through Rashid and reach to their former locations, or to where their home used to stand. The whole movement itself is risky from GBV perspective. It brings a lot of risks. It's crowded. There's a long lining and waits included. People are walking on foot. Roads are completely destroyed. The whole movement exacerbated with the rainy season and floods. The security, of course, itself and safety is not free from risks, and include, of course, harassment, either verbal and also physical violence. The whole anxiety among the people. They are trying to go back home, see what used to be their home, but they don't know what's going to happen after that. There's no really any certainty into that they're going to be able to stay there, or at least stay with any level of security and safety. It's pretty much chaotic. We observe that both men and women are moving. We see that most of them are trying to go back with little of the property that they have left. After being forcefully displaced so many times, of course, their property can practically fit into a backpack, no? Also, when they go back home, it's questionable how they're going to live there, because, as we said, the whole infrastructure is destroyed. Before the movement itself happened, OCHA was giving us some sort of heads up saying, okay, there may be a new ceasefire. Could you please look at our old ceasefire plan and provide us with some feedback? So we provided a GBV mainstreaming into this overall ceasefire plan, but also decided to focus, and this is through participatory, practically through consultations with the GBV AoR members in Gaza. We decided that our priorities are to focus on dignity kits, with also sort of keeping in mind options for contingency, because when we were discussing ceasefire, it didn't happen yet, and we did not really think that it would last, if I may say, after all this time of suffering. Then we also decided, of course, agreed and decided that increase of service delivery points is essential. As I said, in this so-called humanitarian zone, all the services were cramped there, and we practically used one service map that was reflecting that part, and very little in Gaza City and the north of Gaza. So, of course, we needed to expand our outreach, and in order to follow the population and make sure that it's that the services are safely delivered, we were discussing to have formal specialized GBV agencies coming with the population to locations of return. We wanted to advocate and promote cash assistance because of the overall chaos. We were also relying that the commercial sector would be strengthened with the opening of the crossings. So cash assistance would be quite beneficial, especially because we wouldn't really know, and we don't have an overview right now when people decide to go home. So for them, instead of carrying anything as a dignity kit, it may be a burden. So it might be easier for people to actually have cash assistance and just get what they need at the local market rather of their destination. Above all, I think, and regardless of the context, and if or not the ceasefire lasts and turns hopefully in lasting peace. The fact is that GBV capacity is exhausted, and we are stretched out. And we started planning already 3 months ago to have a case management and overall GBV capacity strengthening, but expanding, but focused also on case management. Because I have met some of the case workers who were only opening new cases, 25 per month. So you can imagine the level of exhaustion and the need for capacity. Of course, we continued. We also joined forces with the protection clusters, and well, obviously not marketing our people on the ground as GBV people, but as protection. So we are rotating with the protection on the ground. We have trained people, orientated in the use of our service maps, and we are trying to promote, of course, our priorities. Humanitarian funding has just been activated. We agreed on the 3 protection priorities, which is MHPSS, safeguarding, and protection or AoR specialized responses. In the AoR specialized responses, again, we're pushing forward service delivery points and cash assistance. In parallel with all of that, what we are actually seeing right now, and I'm jumping sort of these periods because I need to explain the context, right? What we are actually seeing right now is people are moving. We are trying to capture the trends to see the impact of the movement of the population on the GBV trends. This is still not ready, and I'm sorry that I don't have it, at hand to share with you right now. But the thing is that please keep in mind that all of the service providers within the protection are the field workers who are also Gazans. So this change and ability to go back to their homes, of course, impacted them as well. So they really need this time to be just themselves, and being exhausted after so long. No, we're not questioning, and there is no. Obviously, there is some sense of solidarity among all of the protection and other workers on the ground. But among the needs, what they are reporting, and even while they are moving with the masses and trying to reach their homes as part of those masses, they do observe and share with us, along with the protection monitors that are based on 4 monitoring locations in the north and southern areas identified by OCHA. So here I listed these needs that they're seeing: food, water, warm clothes, and shoes. I remind you that there is a flood season, and hypothermia has taken, unfortunately, some lives already. Transportation, of course, we even now we have very little ability to provide transportation for 2 challenges. There is no fuel. Roads are completely destroyed, but traditionally also the NGOs, the protection ones, which are mainly national NGOs, have not been cleared for the delivery of fuel, because that fuel was delivered based on the approval of Israel. And now we thanks to, again, a shout out to Protection Cluster, we had an advocacy campaign where we tried to include the local NGOs, and it seems that it has worked. We're still to testify that they told us that it's approved, and most of the NGOs are on the list. We've seen also lactating mothers and pregnant women moving in these crowds. Exhaustion is reported, but also they have been telling us that other types of protection incidents had been reported, had been observed, including verbal harassment. Most of them are relating it to domestic violence, but again, we will have some trends maybe in the next meeting for you to update. Other protection incidents we will also be monitoring and reporting as they come up. Destruction of the roads, the remnants of war, the unexploded ordnance. The risks are very high. The ability to clear these roads, to clear the former homes or rubble that has left from any explosives is something that our mine action colleagues are still developing capacity for. It's politically very sensitive, so but at least right now we managed to secure orientation through GBV service delivery points on the risk itself, so education for the mothers and girls. We are right now, when it comes to implementation of our ceasefire strategy, what we have achieved, and this is in no way meeting the needs. As I said, we've been exhausted in terms of capacity before. We remain exhausted because it takes a lot of resources, human and financial, to actually reach it. Right now we have 16 active service delivery points in Gaza City and North Gaza, and 2 in Rafah. Four of them are only in North Gaza. The challenge, of course, of re-establishing services is destruction. You need a safe space for service delivery point. There is no really even, at times the challenge is even to transport the items you need to set up a safe space. But also there is a challenge in communication, in having the internet and equipping your office and make it decent for work at all. So what we do have, we have outreach teams. They are also under skies, if I can say, as protection monitors. We are implementing protection monitoring and safeguarding. We are basically monitoring at the monitoring points, which used to be called reception points, but now are monitoring points, which are basically OCHA-led monitoring points of the movement. They're monitoring the movement of the population. We have our protection monitors there, but we also have outreach teams, and we are also monitoring any newly established distribution point. So food and shelter and NFI distribution points are covered, including water, because WoS cluster is also catering water to these masses that are moving. On this photo, you're seeing mainly men carrying, and one of them carrying the dignity kit. I think it's also sort of first of all, we are showing only men because based on the source that I received, I asked them where are women? Are women not moving? They said there were women there, but they didn't give a consent to share a photo. But one of the family members was carrying the dignity kit. Having that sort of said, I also want to reflect to that photo is because the dignity kits right now that we are managing to distribute, we are doing them as a blanket distributor. There's no targeting. So whatever we can bring in, we are trying to inject, if I can say, the items into Gaza. However, of course, this is not only because of the needs. So far, we've been, in previous presentation just today, I was saying, we were in average giving 2,000 dignity kits per month for whole of Gaza, and the projected people in need is 1.2 million, 700,000 menstruating women and girls. So over the year, or since I was there, in average every 2 months we would have about 1,500 kits, or yeah, average rough estimate. Which of course is far from meeting the needs for menstrual hygiene management or any personal hygiene management. Fuel for NGOs, as I said, was traditionally limited. The staff I also mentioned are everybody's extremely exhausted, and uncertainty, I think, is additional stress on everyone's planning, personal and professional life. Contingency, given the restrictions that we've experienced before, is very difficult to plan, but also because of the criminality that emerged pre-ceasefire, when we had a lot of looting. So even now, when we bring in the dignity kits, I mean, I'm from GBV perspective, I'm talking about dignity kits, but every cluster on their own, no? Items, when they arrive to the warehouse, it is really a question of time. We need to send them out as soon as possible, because all warehouses, all trucks and convoys are targets of looting. So even now, we expect, and we try to mitigate these risks. It's less now because, of course, people are worried over moving back to their homes and rebuilding and reestablishing themselves, but we still anticipate it. What we also see is foresee as an immediately upcoming challenge is access to housing, land and property, especially for widowed women. The documentation is destroyed. There is no registries that have been that survived this war. And we know that most of the titles were carried by male head of household. So once this the family setup has changed, we are anticipating plenty of claims of discrimination and denial of access to their property for those women that had been widowed. And we are working with the HLP technical working group to try to expand the number of at least legal aid providers. However, there is no formal law enforcement. So for as long as there's no formal law enforcement, there are no formal justice systems in place. We are relying on traditional systems. And the traditional systems, as you can imagine, have not always been working in favor of women. So I think that's a run through. I'm so sorry if this was rushed, but I feel like I spoke a lot already, and I apologize if I took too much time. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Azra. And I think it's clear, but just to say, Azra was working in Gaza, not remotely. And that was also why we really wanted to have her be able to provide an update of the current situation before she leaves. And so just to say, if you have a question, please feel free to either put up your hand or just go ahead and take off the unmute your microphone, and you can raise your question. And I don't see Amira, so I think in any case there will be a little bit of time for questions and answers or comments.
Shall I continue?
Go ahead.
Shall I continue? Thank you. First of all, I would like to say congratulations for the ceasefire of the war in Gaza. Thank you also for the brief. So, I am Gabram Lagide from Tigray, Ethiopia, where thousands of women were raped and sexual violence was happened because of the blood war in Tigray, northern Ethiopia. Having this experience in my country, I have one question: How do you access them or track them to take medicine or care, especially in Tigray? What happened was during 6 months, more than 120,000 women were suffering from gender-based violence. However, during our 3 years after, almost 2.5 years after the ceasefire, only 6% of the survivors are come to the health center. Why? Because of the culture for the fear of stigma and discrimination. So that in Gaza, I know many women are suffering from sexual and gender-based violence. So how do you bring them to health center or one-stop center to get services, maybe psychological and mental health services, medical care, and the like? The second point, the second question is, I think there is issue now, the budget, the funding issue. So what is the impact, particularly for sexual violence? I thank you.
Let's see if there's any other questions that we can take, maybe a couple, and then go back to Azra. Anybody else want to raise a question? I don't see any hands. Just to say on Tigray, I think we could also be happy to have a bilateral conversation. I think in this situation, Azra, maybe you can just put it into the context of right now the situation in Gaza, but maybe talk a little bit about issues around stigma and shame, as you know, we know there's no infrastructure right now for one-stop centers and things. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the culture around being able to seek services. It's quite a unique situation, I think, right now in Gaza. But also, I think, you know, there's so many sensitivities around the politics, and we know that Tigray also had a lot of sensitivities around politics. But over to you, Azra.
Thank you, Jennifer. I also see Alma has a hand up. Should we?
Capacity for PSS and case management.
Alma, did you want to?
Staff turnover.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hello, Azra. Nice to see you. I hope you're doing well there. Hope you're okay. Thank you very much for sharing this for all of us who are not there. It's really, I mean, appreciate it a lot. It's really useful to hear from your voice, from you what is happening and what was able to be done, also from GBV AoR point of view. I would like to ask you regarding, you mentioned also pregnant women and the facts about lactating women, etc. So considering the destruction of homes and medical facilities as well as the number of pregnant women, what was the experience from GBV AoR? Has GBV AoR been able to coordinate with the health cluster as well and medical facilities on this matter, especially if we take into account the level of destruction, especially in Gaza? So I'm just curious to hear how that were you able to do anything on that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues. I need to go back a little bit. There was in Gaza, there are layers of crisis happening at the same time, and it feels like every week there's a new layer, while we haven't finished before, the ones from before. Like I also like the way I explained, like one morning I would wake up and I would think, okay, it can't get worse than this. And by noon I'm proven wrong two times. So it's the situation is extreme, it's severe. We had overpacked humanitarian, so-called humanitarian zone that gave us no safe space. So you can pretend that you have a safe space, you put a tent in, but in the evening that same safe space is robbed, looted, and the privacy itself, you don't have it, because right on the other side there is a group of men listening to what's going on. So the environment for help seeking is completely discouraging. That stopped with the time poverty. Women had been made responsible to gather aid. There is no aid. There was no aid at the same time, but they were forced to go out to collect whatever they can for food, for feeding, because there was a belief that they will more likely get this aid. Somebody will rather give to a woman than to a man. So men started applying this force, forcing women out to go collect fuel to burn, to cook their food, items to warm up the tents. There were no proper tents. People were making makeshift tents from the blankets, or the old tents that were already burned by the sun were now supposed to be handling the flooding. Then there are kids. Then there's food. Then there's clean water is not there. It was not, like, when I left. Right now I'm in Iceland, but right before I left, we as UNFPA didn't have clean water to drink. So if we didn't have it, you can imagine how it was for the people on the ground. So anyways, so the time poverty, I think, is one of the greatest challenges. If you speak to women, they are open-minded, and most of them do want help. But the colleague at the beginning asked me about the medicine. The apathy, the level of disappointment and being left abandoned was not working in our favor. I can give beyond SRH. Let's talk about polio. We had 2 polio campaigns. One of them was carried out when we still had checkpoint enforced, making basically a border between Gaza City and Deir el-Balah. In Deir el-Balah, we had all the resources to send to go to cross the checkpoint and reach the people to deliver the polio vaccination, which was, of course, life-saving. But it was an extremely long process, risky and so on, to actually send people up there. But once we did get there, women were asking us in the Women and Go Safe Spaces, sorry, in the sites, so like it's sites and shelters. They were asking, so wait, why are you giving me this? Why are you extending my life? I'm going to die. I don't have water or food. Why do I need this vaccine? Let me die. So they don't, the challenge was like really multi-layered, and it's a true challenge. Then how do you encourage them to go and ask for SRH or believe that they can get any assistance after they are raped? However, they did. Some of them did. We know that we haven't been working in perfect conditions. They had more reasons not to report than to report, but they did approach us. So we have a very strong cooperation with the SRH Technical Working Group that is very active in Gaza. They have rolling training on CMR for medical staff, and most of the I would say most of the health points have the trained at least midwife in CMR, but this is still not enough given the extent of the problem, right? The culture itself, we are still discussing culture that while, you know, they're extremely well educated, progressive, I mean, open-minded in one way, in the other way, in the policy, we're still discussing virginity testing, right? So, so it's you know, there's a lot of need to work on the attitudes to make sure that people can and dare to ask for help. And most of through our trends analysis, we have one question: have you like we do collectively? Have you sought help? Did you access CMR? And I mean, I'm now translating to our language, but you know, it's not like that asked. But most of them, the reason why they do not go to a health service is because they don't believe them, because they think that they will be judged, and or because they will be their secret will not be protected. No, so they will be stigmatized, and police would have to involve, which will lead to investigation, which will lead to an increase of violence. So it's an extremely limiting and a discouraging environment, I would say. I don't know how it's going to work. I'm not, unfortunately, and I'm heartbroken that I won't be there. But it's time for somebody else. I'm sort of tapping out, if I can say, but the challenge will remain of overall social behavior and attitudes toward women. The fact is that they have been carrying the greatest burden of this war, and they should be recognized as such. And Alma, you probably know. Instead, they are supposed to be respected, and you know, the stigma of rape should the narrative around rape should switch to, as we had experienced, of course, in Bosnia. So the victim blaming, this might be a good time to talk about transforming the attitudes and breaking that taboo, and while promoting the position of women and recognizing their role in survival of this war.
Azra, thank you. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and you have about 5 minutes left before we switch over to Syria. I know it's challenging.
Sorry, I could speak about Gaza forever. This has been MHPSS work.
Yeah, so there's a question around case management and around MHPSS. There's kind of two different questions, and safe spaces as well. And I mean, it's kind of hard with all the images that we see from the media to imagine safe spaces being able to exist anywhere in Gaza. But I also just want to say quickly, I'm going to hand over to Astrid. I'm actually in the Global Cluster Coordination Group meeting. So I'm handing over to Astrid, who will continue with the facilitation. And if we have another opportunity to do another potentially ad hoc call, because I know there's so much to cover, and I'm sure with Syria, we're also going to feel very challenged to keep within time, and we have DRC happening right now, Sudan. I mean, it's heartbreaking the number of emergencies, and feeling how to do the work without feeling completely overwhelmed, and just also a huge thank you for all of the work and the other folks who've been doing coordination. It's so hard, and Amira couldn't join, but we know that she also has been working very hard and actually lived in Gaza until March of last year. So back to you for the question around MHPSS.
Thank you, Jennifer, and I will definitely make sure that Amira hears what you've said. The people, since I arrived to Gaza, people have been asking me about MHPSS. And there's been this declaration of MHPSS crisis in Gaza, and indeed it is. But what do we do about it? We are very limited. We were very limited because you can't talk about recovery and rehabilitation when every time you leave your home, you can be shot at. Whether you're an aid worker or a woman or a child, it was indiscriminate. I mean, I'm leaving now, so I can openly say, but this is what I've witnessed. I think, look, when ceasefire was announced, I received so many messages from partners, and they were saying, Azra, now it's the time to cry. Now we can sit and cry, finally. People were holding back because they were trying to focus on survival. The MHPSS crisis, the one that they are mainly talking about, the only thing that we realized that we should focus on is preventing suicides. To be honest, preventing harmful attitudes, harmful behavior. I said, no, we have 25 new cases for case management on one psychologist or social worker. Everybody was, all hands on table. Everybody was working everything. The number of cases people were receiving were huge. Suicidal attempts were, of course, taking time to disclose, but majority of them were expressing them. The crisis, the MHPSS crisis, of course, wasn't staying only with GBV survivors or people at risk of GBV. It was with the whole population. So it would be disrespectful to deny, the need of or to forget that. I wonder how generations are going to deal with this. Now the new science is saying that it stays imprinted, the trauma. It goes through the generations. So yeah, it's going to be difficult. For the case management, we try to actually promote through case management access to MHPSS. The task force itself used to be set up and was ready to even implement IMS Plus in October 2023. Just then, and then everything collapsed. So the difficulty with providing case management or MHPSS, case management as a form of MHPSS as well, no? They had a difficulty because of the population movement. You can't trace your case. The evacuation order that is usually issued after the attack is carried out forces everyone, including service delivery providers, on the move. So follow up to the case and understanding where is going to be their new location and what services would be there was practically impossible. So we managed to somehow get used to working in that chaos in August last year when we resumed the case management task force. And even the case management task force was, while we were trying to set it up, in all respect and kudos to Amira for leading this, we reduced the case management on 2 basic forms that were written and avoid every single written trace of a case. The points of delivery would be women and girls safe spaces, but mind you, actual women and girls safe spaces in Deir al-Balah and Han Yunis, where estimated 950,000 people lived, there were only 5 women and girls safe spaces. If you wanted to build more, there was no physical space to pitch a tent. So again, extreme limitation. So hopefully this is now going to move on. We are now rebuilding our and without ceasefire, we were up to update the SOPs for case management based on this experience. So we're also investing in training of trainers so that we can roll out and build more capacity on case management, despite of the context, regardless of the context. So yeah, I hope I answered the questions. I'm checking.
Thank you, Azra. That was great. And yeah, all my. Now I get emotional and I shouldn't be because I'm
No,
supposed to
me too. I can't.
facilitate.
I'm sorry.
All my admiration
I really am
and
so sorry.
respect.
I keep on apologizing, but yeah.
Before we go into Syria, Verena, are you online?
Yes.
I think you're online. Yes, I see you online.
Can you hear me?
So now over to Verena Bruno, who is our national coordinator for Syria, right, sitting in Damascus, to present on GBV response in Syria. It's been some amazing weeks and months, even for us who are not in the region, just trying to follow and understand all the changes and conflict and fighting between, and changes between Gaza, escalations now in the West Bank, Lebanon, and Syria. So we're looking forward to hearing more from you, Verena. And yeah, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Astrid. Before we start, just to mention, Fulvia also managed to join us, our coordinator
Sorry,
from Syria.
Here.
So we will present together. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I think I'll hand it over to Fulvia, who will start us off, and then I will chip in. Fulvia?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the time. And yeah, I just wanted to say before we start that I was just chatting on the side with Azra before, and I think I was saying if there is a place where we can let go of emotions is this group. So I think that everyone is kind of joining in kudos to Azra and all those that are working in Gaza right now. Yeah, so moving on to the Syria response. So as you probably know, over these years, we referred to the Syria response in terms of whole of Syria, which means that still right now, even with the changes in the reality on the ground, we still have different hubs that coordinate the GBV response in different areas of the country. And so it's myself based in Amman, and then it's Verena who's based in Damascus, as she said, but we also have other two colleagues, Ken and Florence, that are based, one in Gaziantep overseeing the response in Northwest Syria, and Florence is based in Northeast Syria, overseeing the coordination of GBV response in those areas. This scenario is likely going to change because of the changes in let's say in access and in those that are controlling and the authorities in the different areas. So in the next slide, we have put together just a map of the current situation. This is as of 14th of January. If you see now, most of the area is under the control of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. Those were in the past we're only controlling or ruling in Idlib and Aleppo, so the northwest side, in two governorates, whereas they have kind of taken over and the most of the country. But we still have all the part of northeast Syria that is under Kurdish authorities, and the part in green, which is basically the Syrian National Army with the influence of Turkey. And the part in yellow is the Golan Heights under Israel. So because of this situation, that's why probably this coordination with the whole of Syria and the 3 different hubs is likely going to change. I'm saying likely because we are still discussing very much what the transition will look like, how much time it will have, and what are the implications also in terms of human resources, the organizations, how are they moving, how are they expanding geographically, and we really want to, I'll make this point and then hand over to you, Verena. What we really want to emphasize is to try and not lose the hard work and the great lessons learned that we had over these 12 years. Those actors that have been working in Northwest Syria for the last 10 years have been engaging with the authorities that are now going to build the new government. And so we do have experience, we do have a lot of capacity, from not only from international organizations and international NGOs, but also from local NGOs, women-led organizations. So the transitioning and the planning takes everything into consideration and wants to actually build on what we learned and what is strong, and try to, as much as possible, make it a reality for all the country. So maybe with this introduction, over to you, Verena, for highlights on the humanitarian situation and services, etc. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Fulvia, also for taking us through the map. Also, for those who work in Syria, the map of Syria is always a learning experience, because it's been changing and changing over the years, and Fulvia knows that better than me. So yeah, in the next slide, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the current humanitarian situation. Today is exactly 1 month and 3 weeks from the fall of the previous regime. It was the 8th of December. And since then, a lot has changed. At the moment, the situation is stabilizing, especially on the security side. In the main city, it is a transitional phase. So definitely the systems, the new government systems are still to be fully put back in place. There are a number of security operations ongoing. That is jargon for, some cells of insecurity also in main cities. The rural areas are the ones that are registering more concerns in terms of security, especially in the areas that are associated or affiliated with the former regime. And recently, there are some tensions in some of the areas in the northeast and in coastal, and we have observed what we call new vulnerable groups, again, because some of the groups remain more linked with the previous regime and are in a way targeted from different perspectives. The economic hardship is massive. It was already there before, with a number of concerns in terms of access to cash and accessibility to economic resources. At the moment, we also have issues linked to bank access. Most of the bank accounts were frozen or blocked. Now, gradually, they're being reopened. So population, but also partners, also service providers have new access to their bank accounts, but it's been a gradual process of reopening. In general, there are consistent basic services constraints, starting with electricity. Even in Damascus and in most of the country, access to electricity is very scarce, only a few hours per day. Access to health, access to basic services remains also very scattered. Also, and we will share more about the service access, because some of the partners have suspended operations because of the new registration requirements from the new authorities. There are displacements and movement constraints regularly recorded, especially internally displaced population in Northwest and also newly arriving in Northeast. We heard yesterday that, or 2 days ago, that there is now a new circular from the caretaker authorities for the opening of Al-Hol camp. So Al-Hol camp is one of the biggest camps, IDPs camps in Syria, hosting a number of population, including those affiliated with ISIS. So this puts us in front of a new scenario once again, and again, new vulnerable groups, because we're not very sure of what the movement of this population will be and what the impact at community level, all the response at community level will be, including in terms of new exposure to gender-based violence. And so all of the above really takes us to exacerbation of different risks of gender-based violence in camps, but also within the communities, within the areas that remain targeted and remain a bit more vulnerable. If we go to the next slide, we're going to share a bit more on the services, as I mentioned. So from the beginning of the new crisis, if we can call it like that, or the system-wide scale-up, we have started mapping regularly, of course, through the support of OCHA and from the whole of Syria down to the hubs, the operational status of all partners and their facilities. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, most of the partners had suspended because of security reasons, but also because most facilities were looted, were attacked during the early days. Now, a month and a half later, most of the facilities, especially the static ones, have been reopened throughout the country, while we still face challenges with the mobile services because of challenges also due to the increase of fuel price and availability of fuel and overall security. So we are observing a reduction of reach from mobile services because they cannot move, and also population fears movement in some areas, especially during the afternoon or in the evening. As I mentioned, there are new registration processes. So there is a requirement now for all new partners to re-register with the new caretaker authorities and the Ministry of Social Affairs before they can operate again. This applies to those partners that might be planning to move from the Northwest, for instance, because they have now new access to all the other areas of the country. But also to partners that were already there and want to start new projects. So it's a way of the new caretaker authorities to familiarize with their stakeholders. And of course, the USAID suspension of funding affected all of us, all sectors, including the GBV subsector. We did start a partners impact mapping, also coordinated by OCHA, and we will get the results of this, but pretty much we expect a good 80% of partners impacted by the funding cuts. In the next slide, we've just put together a snapshot of the situation throughout the different governorates in Syria of the service capacity. So the table at the top is showing 13 out of 14 governorates. So this is, let's say, the area that I manage from Damascus. So from Aleppo, Hasake, and down to all the other areas in the coast and the central. Overall, 71% of the total facilities is fully operational. This is as of yesterday. 14% are partially operational. It means maybe they're not at full capacity. They have reduced staff or they have reduced supplies, and 15% are suspended. And the reasons for suspension are, as I mentioned, registration, or because the facilities were looted and not yet rehabilitated, or for security concerns. So in a way, the situation is looking much better than a few weeks ago. And below we have a bit of a breakdown between the Syria hub, that is the hub from Damascus, covering all the governorates above. So we have about 383 facilities that are operational, 75 partially and 83 suspended. And by facility, we mean a mix of women and girls safe spaces, which is, as we know, one of the most effective model in Syria. But we also have community well-being centers, which is a bit more of a combination of services under one roof. We have child-friendly spaces, some reproductive health clinics, which also integrate GBV services. In Northwest, we also have a better situation than a few weeks ago, about 24 actors that are part of the subsector, 156 service delivery points or facilities, including 54 WGSS that are currently providing services. And of course, there is always the issue of closing down for some of the facilities. To date, we have recorded 8 WGSS that are expected to close by the end of March. But this is something that is common throughout the hubs in Northwest, Northeast, and within all the governorates. And it's an issue that we had even before this current situation. The closing is due also to reduce funding and challenges related to the overall context. So this is the snapshot on the services. If we go to the next slide, Fulvia already mentioned it in her intro. So there are big questions at the moment about the coordination structure and the foreseen changes to the whole response mechanism in Syria. So we do know that there will probably be a transition out of the whole Syria structure because that was created when the access was not possible. But we don't have the clear guidance yet on how that is going to happen and when it's going to happen. We have received a number of requests from partners that want to join the coordination mechanisms, mostly from Northwest. And yes, as we mentioned, we are trying to support being inclusive and trying to reduce duplication and work together, but at the same time, trying to stick to the guidance and to the regulations that are coming up day by day. As I say, it's a learning curve for everybody. So every day there is new information that we didn't have the day before. And on the overall context, there is no official pushback, let's say, from the new authorities on our mandate or on our topics. But there are some anecdotal reports, especially in the south, in Daraa, Quneitra, and south of Damascus, and also a bit in the coastal, of some more restrictive social norms. As an example, in some locations, they have been asking women and men to separate into public transport, or they have asked some of our female or women collaborators that they cannot move around without being accompanied by a male of the family. Or just yesterday, we heard that in one college, they were having exams, and they also decided to separate female students from male students. So these are some hints that we are receiving, and it also keeps changing. In the same location one day, it might be better than the day before. But there is no official pushback on our mandate, and most partners are receiving approvals for their projects and for their joining this site, with their titles being GBV response. So we want to stay positive, and we don't want to preempt any of the challenges that we might face, remaining cognizant that we might have to face them. As an intersector, we are working on a number of processes, including for assessments. There is a protection rapid need assessment that we are preparing. There is also an intersector, multi-sector rapid need assessment that will be conducted possibly later in February. And as GBV subsector, we are now doing the data collection for voices of Syria, which, as you know, is the main data source for our HNO figures. We did stop in December, but now we all agreed with Fulvia and the other colleagues that it's the best time for us to conduct this focus group discussions to understand the new context, to understand the new challenges of women and girls in particular. And we are also conducting a women and girls safe space assessment. This is a sustainability and effectiveness assessment. We also started this last year, and the purpose is to explore different ways of running WGSS and understand if there are more sustainable ways to implement the model within the humanitarian early recovery nexus, which, as you might have heard, was already a discussion for last year. On the HNO HRP, the 2025 HPC is paused, so we are not officially putting together that for now. And the no-cost extension for the HRP was just released, I think, today. It's a 3-month extension, which is a bit controversial, because it was supposed to be a no-cost extension, but in fact it's costed. So if you look at, thank you, Fulvia, for sharing the link. If you look at it, it's been reframed as humanitarian priorities for the first quarter of 2025. So you will find there also our targets, our focus, and our PIN for 2025, which was calculated before the fall of the regime and also before the Lebanon influx crisis, remains at 8.5 million for 2025. So we'll have to see how to proceed with that in the next few weeks when the situation clears up. I think this was the last one. Fulvia, I will hand it over back to you if you want to add anything.
Maybe thank you, Verena. I just wanted to say one word that of hope and closing maybe with a positive note, even with all this uncertainty, because what we have experienced in any case is a lot of positive vibes generally from the Syrian people, from colleagues, etc. With, of course, a bit of also being cautious of what's going to happen. But anyway, the fall of the regime was, as you have seen, was welcomed and very, very positively. So we still remain hopeful that the new Syria can be built by Syrians and can have a different shape and form.
Thank you, Fulvia. Indeed, we're all very hopeful for Syria. I'd like to a huge thank you to you. I do want to open up if there are questions to Fulvia and Verena. Don't see. I don't see any questions. I think, Lamia.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Verena and Lubia, for the presentation. And hi, Verena, this is Lamia from Save the Children. So I have a question about the kind of the priorities for the GBV response in the coming period, as we are working on our strategies, and we would love to know what should be the focus, with everything that is happening. Everyone is doing assessments, and we're trying to kind of coordinate with the other response actors so that we don't duplicate the efforts. But I wanted to ask this question to you. And then the other question is, how different you think would be the voices, like the update of the voices from Syria, from the report that you have published like in 2024? Do you think that there will be a massive change in there, or do you think it's going to be somehow similar?
Thank you, Lamia. I'll try to go first, and then Verena, you can come in. So I'll start with voices. Actually, we are very curious and we don't know. I think that in terms of so voices has always been the document where we kind of have so we give really the space for women and girls to tell us what are the challenges they face, what are the GBV types, how are they coping with the violence, etc. I don't think that right now we will see a big, huge change in the types of GBV that they are experiencing. Actually, as Verena was also saying, it's not only about the 12 years of conflict and displacement, but it's really with everything else that is happening, especially the economic crisis that is putting a lot of it's creating a lot of uncertainty also in the families, and therefore increasing distress and intimate partner violence in particular. So in that case, I wouldn't say we're expecting a lot of differences. But I think that maybe in the coping strategies, or also in what we are able to include in the report, because we've always been a bit we've always been it has always been very sensitive what we could say or not say. So in that case, I think we will have a bit more freedom to explain things as they are. And in terms of the priorities, I've touched upon some, which is making sure that in this transition, we're not losing capacity, we're not losing services, and we're not losing human resources that have been trained. So building, and on the opposite, that we can build on what is there and the lessons learned and the strength. And at the same time, I think continuing service delivery and making sure that we avoid duplication, but really can fill the gaps that we have. I think that yesterday I was doing this. I was looking a bit at the data with the IMO, and we have only 33% of the sub-districts that are covered with some kind of response services. So there is still a huge gap in service provision. Maybe over to you, Verena, to complement. Want to add?
Yes, thank you, Fulvia. I think you covered it well. Just to say, Lamia, is good to see you here. Save the Children is an example of those partners that are, inquiring on the options for expanding the support from the Northwest to the other side. So yeah, definitely we're not, the priorities will remain as they were, right? In terms of the key objectives: essential service delivery, the prevention and working on social norms, and the risk mitigation, including throughout the engagement with other sectors. To me, is more about how we're going to coordinate with a bigger, group of partners to strengthen the support where it's needed, like Fulvia said, and also to look at the new groups coming in. We're looking at internal movement, but also we didn't mention the returnees, which we're also starting to map. We don't know to which extent people that have been out of the country for these years will come back and how they will resettle. I do feel, like Fulvia said, we do have an opportunity in this context to consider this type of new engagements, also the coordination with the health sector, the human rights, and the MHPSS, to provide support to these new vulnerable groups. We do have a meeting for all new partners that is set for Thursday, And we will also present our work plan and our priorities once again at the sector coordination meeting, which is set for tomorrow. So there is going to be a lot of engagement to talk more and more of these priorities, and they will evolve, right? So they will be a canvas where we will all be able to work on. And yes, the last point is on not losing the work also done in all the hubs. So there will be opportunities to bring in GBV IMS maybe to the whole country, the e-referral pathway to the whole country. These are things that we have been starting to discuss, but not yet to the full extent. So stay tuned, I will say.
Thank you, Verena. I have the unfortunate role of always, there's too much interesting things to discuss and so much good work going on, and I still have to look at the time. I also hope, I mean, I hear all the voices of hope, and I think, you know, keeping the services and maintaining and that focus will be super important. And I think for that as well, let's hope that the sanctions will fall as well, right? Because that's a big part of why we're in this, well, part of the story of why the people of Syria are suffering. With that, we have one last agenda item, and that is Nigeria. And it's Hira. Hashmey, are you online, Hira?
Yes, good evening, Astrid and colleagues.
Good evening. Nice. Thank you for being patient. So the last agenda item is Hira will present the adolescent needs assessment that was carried out in collaboration with UNICEF and UNFPA, which was part of also a commitment done to the IS principals meeting on GBV a year and a half ago. Hira, over to you. We have not so much time. I hope people can stay on a little longer, but over to you so that we maximize, the hour we have, the 1.5 hour we have. We can see your presentation well. And of course, Hira is our national coordinator for Nigeria. Are you there? I see your internet connection.
Yes, can you see me and hear me?
We can hear you really well. We can't see you, but I can see that your interconnection is low. So maybe go with
so
it like now.
Yeah, so please allow me to switch off the video given the issues with the internet. Okay, thank you so much, Astrid and colleagues. For those who don't know me, I'm working as GBV AoR coordinator here in Northeast Nigeria for last 3 years. This is my 4th year in Nigeria. So I'll just present quickly, given the time that we have here with us. We did this adolescent needs assessment on gender-based violence, its intersectionality with health and community perspectives last year. The main purpose of this, basically the assessment was to see what are some of the needs and gaps, and also some of the perspectives from the women, adolescent girls, and boys. This assessment also contributed to the global review that was led by UNICEF and UNFPA. For us as GBV AoR, as we know, our main priority is to see like what are the CMR services provided to the GBV survivors, including prevention and management of HIV and STIs. But we also know that we GBV survivors also need SRH services, for example, family planning, maternal and neonatal health care, and so on and so forth. So just a quick background again on what the assessment was all about. There was different tools that we used. Colleagues who are also working on SRH, they would know that there is an interagency guideline on SRH services. So there are minimum standards for that. So we used 3 tools out of that manual. One was on the mapping. The second one was on the health facility needs assessment. And lastly, we used focus group discussions for the 3 population categories that I mentioned: women, adolescent girls, and boys. Now, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so these are the tools that we used, and this was done in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. These are the 3 states in the Northeast, which is impacted more than a decade's conflict in this area. And in total, the total number of health facilities that we assessed were around 59 in these 3 states. And if you look at the sample size for the focus group discussions, there were around 230 individuals who were being who participated in the FGDs. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, this is again a snapshot of the numbers that we of the sample size and the name of the organization. So basically, we have like around 80 partner GBV subsectors in these 3 states, but we did this assessments using the INGOs, local partners, and including women-led organizations. So you can see the key INGOs that we have in other contexts as well, like IMC, IRC, PUI, and CA. But we were really happy to have local partners who really helped us with, especially with the focus group discussions that were being carried out in the 3 states. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, these were the dashboards that came out as an outcome of the assessment. We had 3 dashboards, one for the service mapping, the second one on the health facility needs assessment, and also on the focus group discussions. So since this is this adolescent assessment should ideally be done after 6 months, so we will be planning to have it again after 6 months, and we'll be using the dashboards again for the analysis on the needs, gaps, and the recommendations. Can you go to the next one, please? Yeah, if we look at the findings from the service mapping that we did of the partners, the main gaps that we had were in terms of lack of clinical management of rape survivors for the GBV survivors, and also insufficient services revolving around STIs and HIV, mental health, psychosocial support, limited forensic evidence and services, and then, of course, the broader gender inequality issues, poverty, education, and also lack of community interventions by the partners. Can you go on to the next one, please? Now, if you look at this graph, it is evident that like most of the services that were being provided by these partners, which included both GBV and SRH partners, was around family planning, which is 69%, followed by maternal and newborn care, 52%. And the last one was referrals to the tertiary care level hospitals. And if we look at the CMR services, only 38% of the health facilities were providing CMR services. Now, this indicated a huge gap given that the sexual violence, how rampant it is in Northeast. And the investment that, or the funding that has gone to the partners over the years on the CMR services. And also, as I mentioned, that referrals, these facilities were actually at the primary healthcare level, and did not include the secondary or the tertiary healthcare. And if we look at the referrals, which was the least, which is 17%, means that the survivors who would be needing secondary or tertiary care level support would be extremely low. Can we go to the next? Now, looking at the health facility needs assessments, again, as I mentioned, we assessed 59 health facilities. Again, the findings, if we look at the analysis, it is not that discouraging. Like it's 85% of the facilities were located in the Borno state, which is the epicenter of the conflict. At the primary healthcare centers, 75% of the facilities mentioned that they have the written protocols they are providing. They have the consultations rooms, which are private, ensuring the privacy of the GBV survivors. Then 88% of the facilities also had equipment, medicines, except for child survivors, like not having dolls or toys. Then all of the facilities had basic medical equipment, only 34%, but only 34% could collect forensic evidence. And then lastly, 71% had medical examination forms. These were on the tools that they had to monitor the equipment and also the services and supplies. Can you go to the next one? Now, this is the list of the facilities that were being assessed by these partners. Now, again, as I mentioned, overall, it looks good according to the partners, like because partners have this understanding that even more than if the percentage is more than 75%, it is good. However, if we look at the eligibility, only 15% out of these 59 health facilities were eligible for providing CMR services. Now, this eligibility is basically those partners who scored 100%, the scoring of 100%. And there are only, can you go to the next, please? So in total, only 9 partners qualified as 100% providing CMR services. Now, based on this, we've also been in discussion with the partners who were less than 100% to see how we can have a capacity development plan for them to see for them to improve their services. Now, according to the guidelines that we have, the interagency guidelines, it does not specify that every partner has to meet 100% criteria. But given that those are the minimum standards or the services that needs to be provided for providing life-saving services, it is encouraged for the partners to achieve this 100%. So this is something that we've been working with the partners to improve their capacities. Can you go on to the next slide? Now, if we look at the findings from the adolescent girls, boys, and women, just to summarize, the key needs or the gaps that adolescent girls highlighted were around like lack of menstrual hygiene, MHM practices, and also the lack of sanitary pads. Then also lack of information revolving around STIs, and using of emergency contraception was only related to females, but not very common amongst adolescent boys. And then, of course, they mentioned that the healthcare services were inadequate, particularly for GBV survivors and also for pregnant adolescent girls, given that the teenage pregnancy is also high in Nigeria, and particularly in Northeast, due to poverty and also because of the conflict, that the protracted crisis that we have here in Nigeria for more than 10 years. If we look at the findings from the FGDs that we had amongst adolescent boys, again, 71% were unaware of HIV risks. There was lack of understanding of the STI risks, and also unawareness on the key health facilities that are providing SRH GBV services in these health facilities. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, pregnancy-related issues are more in tuned or focused, according to adolescent boys, towards girls. And the boys were not open and having discussions even on that. Looking at the adult women, they also identified that they do have knowledge or basic awareness on identifying the STIs, like the infections, and then also the SRH issues, but did mention about the lack of healthcare services. Now, if we compare the FGDs, the findings and from the FGDs and with the health facility assessments, I'm sure you would see that the services being assessed at the health facility level was quite encouraging. But if you look at the findings from the FGDs, there's quite discrepancies in the knowledge and also the services that these partners are actually targeting. Now, adolescent girls, boys, and women are the main target audience of each interventions that these partners are serving. So can we go to the next? Now, again, if we look at the barriers to adolescent inclusion, there were a list of barriers, for example, lack of confidential services, stigmatization and fear of exposure, parental consent and legal barriers, financial constraints, lack of youth-friendly spaces, ignorance and lack of awareness, inadequate infrastructure and supplies, including having private spaces, and cultural and religious beliefs. Like a lot of adolescent girls and boys also mentioned that they were not even aware that these services are being provided in the health facilities free of cost. So that is something that we have also recommended to include as IC material in their community sensitization to let the audience, particularly girls and boys, know that these services are free of cost. Can we go to the next? Now, the limitations and challenges at GBV AoR level, as we know that, I mean, in the context of Northeast Nigeria, we do not have, what do you call it, systems for, or the HR required to monitor and go and like in person do the field monitoring of all the health facilities in these 3 states. So that has also led to like a lack of independent verification, especially when it comes to health facilities. So it was more of a self-assessment of the partners themselves who noted that these are the services that are being provided. So which could have led to like for example, conflict of interest, because they would always think that these assessments are being used to raise resources and it goes to donors. So they need to show a good picture instead of telling you the right picture in hand. Like I have been visiting a lot of health facilities here in Bay States, but the situation is quite different when it comes to reality. Like you won't see female healthcare providers, midwives or nurses, and also being trained on CMR. And also, if we look at the supplies like commodities, there is a lot of insufficient quantity and not even insufficient in a lot of health facilities. There are totally absence of equipment and supplies. And then, of course, organizational priorities. Like we intentionally chose those partners who were both SRH and GBV, so that we do not have a problem working with the getting the data, because a lot of GBV teams, they do not have a SRH background amongst these partners, especially local partners. So that was one of the, like, it supported the assessment, but then again, having a parallel structure within different organizations was a challenge. And then lastly, on the definition of quality, since this assessment was also focusing on the quality, the tools that we used, there were different definitions of quality, or the understanding of the definition of quality amongst the partners. Like, for example, the qualifying criteria that I mentioned, for them, even 70% is a good quality parameter for providing CMR services. Can we go to the next? These are some of the recommendations that we gave. For example, increasing investment in the CMR services, strengthening referral linkages, enhancing their community education. As we know that if we look at our GBV services, community sensitization goes hand in hand. And there are partners who invest a lot in community sensitization, but it's also strategizing. For example, if you are having a women-girl safe space or one-stop center, the community sensitization should be in the same the same caseload of your intervention. Otherwise, it will be problematic, because, of course, given the need in Nigeria, we cannot meet the 100% needs of the population. So in order to provide the services, they need to sensitize the education within their caseload. And then increasing protocol compliance, ensuring the equipment and the supplies are there, also for improving forensic evidences, because access to justice and legal aid is also one of the biggest gaps in Northeast Nigeria. ensuring the key important vaccines are there, and then also enhancing comprehensive sexuality education within their SRH interventions. And then some of the partners, again, since they do not own, also provide livelihood opportunities. So maybe the suggestion was also to enhance socioeconomic opportunities for girls and boys. Can we go to the next? Yeah, so mainly the recommendations, the above mentioned are just a few that I've mentioned, but I can share the report as well. We also disseminate it through community of practice and also through different platforms. This actually is the recommendations is for the each amongst the government authorities. We have a set of recommendations for Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Justice, including Ministry of Social Development and Women Affairs, who are the chairs of the GBV subsector in the 3 states. Then also for other sectors like child protection, AoR, and health sector. And needless to say, a set of recommendations for GBV AoR partners themselves. So if we look at the holistic approach, the recommendations for at the policy and program and community levels. So I think this is the last slide. I will, yeah. Thank you so much, and sorry for rushing through.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we didn't
Thank
give you much of a choice, so I'm sorry we made you rush through, Hira. Are there, I mean, there are several people in the chat who are asking to see just if you can share the report. So I suggest we'll try to share it to everyone on the call afterwards, unless we have a link. Are there any questions or comments for Hira? I thought it was interesting, actually, you're finding that the adolescent boys knew so little about STIs and pregnancies and how pregnancies happen and pregnancy prevention. That kind of, I mean, the impact on the girls must be huge as well of that. So I'm glad that was part of the recommendations. I don't know. Has there been more thought maybe on the access barriers for the adolescent girls to access services? You mentioned the parents and kind of the fear of or the need for consent or privacy. I don't know if there's been more discussions in Nigeria about addressing those, increasing the access of adolescents.
Okay, especially for the parental consent, most of the partners do include trainings and awareness raising for parents. And if you are also working on school-related gender-based violence, so they include teachers and peers as well. So this is already part of some of the partners, but it is not like taken as a, for example, not all partners are working on with parents, right? So they have specific fund, there are specific INGOs who have specific funding to ensure that the concerns like parental consent or making them aware and having a more of a enhancing relationship with their kids, but not like all partners. But this is, again, some of the things that we've been discussing to have IEC material, particularly to see, and which are pictorials to see how we can do it in 2025.
Yeah, because I can think in much more liberal cultures as well, the adolescence and how much you want to tell your parents is of course a big question. So whether you go and seek services.
Yes, and just to add, we're also working with the education sector, and we will be having like 2 workshops in February, having Verena coming down to Maiduguri, where one of the outcome is to work with the Ministry of Education to include gender-based violence in the education curriculum through the ministry. So these are some of the aspects that we are working with the education sector as well.
Great. Thank you, Hira. So I don't know, are there other, I see that people are starting to drop off because we are over time. Are there any other
urgent feedback requests? I don't see any. So if you have, I suggest you take off you open your microphone and just intervene. No. Then a huge thank you to you, Hira. Again, a huge thank you to the team for Syria and the whole of Syria. And a huge, huge thank you again to Azra and Amira, who is not on the call. I don't know if you're aware, Amira has been in Gaza for years before the conflict. She's from Gaza. The first time I met her in person, she could explain all the preparedness planning in case of conflict and bombardments. And I think they all failed when the war became bigger than we ever thought. But join me in wishing her good luck, even if she's not on the call. She's going to go on to Yemen. So she's leaving Gaza. She did have to leave earlier. She's been supporting Palestine's or home country until now. And she's moving on to become the GBV coordinator in Yemen. And yeah, and again, thank you so much, Azra. I know it was a difficult decision to stay or to leave. And I think you're right that at some time you've held the fort in Gaza for a long time, and now it's time for someone else to come in, and we will do our best from the global and the regional AoR as well to continue all the good work. I think with that, let's hope for the best for Gaza and the West Bank and Syria and Nigeria. And I wish you a good evening or afternoon. Bye.
Bye.